This is your rather shaggy professor this morning, and I'm here to talk to you about a couple things and sort of introduce you to the second act or the second unit of your uh, writing class and civic engagement and medical humanities. First thing I want to talk about a little bit is your experience writing the trauma narratives as a sort of segue or transition into what we're doing next. Uh, all the assignments in this course are designed to work together. In each unit, there are things to do that help and then build up to your final presentation or your final paper for that unit. The the first unit was an orientation unit to help you understand medical humanities, to sort of get you to working with the idea of writing about trauma, about the importance of writing and that sort of things to your life and to the lives of others. Now, I realize there's been some resistance to that on the part of a few people. Most people got right into it, but I want to explain a little something about your problems with emotions in writing. First of all, this is not a class that is intended to be a therapy class per se. It's a class to help you write better, to engage the emotional aspects as well as the reasoning and as well as ethics, and to engage a public audience. The idea of finding that space between personal and public in regards to this is very much a matter of how you approach it. There is, however, the fact that no one can escape writing about emotions or working with emotions in their life if you think you can get through college or any place else without engaging a context where emotions are high and people are responding from an emotional level, including yourself. You're somewhat deluded about the nature of life and living and need to be aware that learning to manage these things and work with them in a writing situation or in a communication situation is essential to your well-being and actually your success in life. So I feel very comfortable with working with these, putting them in a rhetorical perspective. So moving on to our editorials or the Act 2. I provided a blend space series of activities as an introduction. This piece that I'm talking about here will go into that as well. I hope you work through that and sort of get an idea of how the different appeals work. Much of what we're doing now in the editorial sections, working on the idea of appeals to audiences and to make a stand and come up with something that you want to say something about to a specific audience. So the introductory activities, such as looking at other people's editorials and working on topics, and then drafting an editorial and moving into an opportunity to publish it somewhere, is the sequence of events. And the blended space activities, there are 7 of them, including this video, will pretty much situate you in the idea of the appeals and how they work in writing and in communication. You may already know something about the appeals. Ethos, logos, and pathos are the rhetorical appeals. I have added to that story and aesthetic experience because those are the glue that hold together these kinds of things. And our educational system, as Sir Ken Robinson points out, is not big on helping us work with the aesthetic environment, divergent thinking, those sorts of things. And they're essential to coming up with answers and with thinking through problems of personal and public consequence. So that's what this is all about. I'm just going to go through a brief introduction to each one of the sections in that blended space presentation. And I've sort of written out some things here. It The first one is sort of a look at the appeals, and it is a lecture written by someone else about the issue of pathos, logos, and ethos. I see pathos, logos, and ethos as the pathos being the emotional content, logos being the reasoning, and ethos being both the idea of ethics, the things we should do, and the idea of your character in the piece. So that first section introduces you to those ideas, and you may know a lot about that already. If you do, you can skip right to number 2, which is just sort of looking at that full range of appeals, introducing you to the idea of mythos and aesthetics, so that by the time you get to 3, you can see an application of how aesthetics and art and emotion play a role in the act of persuasion. That's Zach's music and his story, and you'll find that, I think, to be moving. One of the things I point out in there is, try to resist this if you can. I don't think human beings can resist that sort of thing. Number 4, there are questions to provide a basis for your rhetorical analysis of those appeals in the Zach YouTube. Number 5 is critical, I think, to understand the reasoning and history behind all this stuff we're doing about divergent thinking, aesthetics, emotion, and education. And Sir Ken Robertson has this wonderful piece, and it's actually pretty entertaining by the way they set it up and use a whiteboard to discuss the role of education and how we are sort of locked into a left brain or linear approach to education, whereas the right brain needs to be involved, and that, of course, is the arts, and the arts is they're applied to sciences and medicine, all the sorts of things that we have come to believe work exclusively with sort of linear protocols. Then there is this, which is a little introduction, and I want to come back to a moment to this idea of public and private before we go on. You're in a phase now where it's a much more public phase. That first one was somewhat private, although it didn't need to be, or personal. I said you didn't have to disclose anything you didn't feel comfortable disclosing, and that you could do a biography instead of an autobiography in terms of looking at a history of trauma. The thing that a lot of people missed was the history of national trauma or historical trauma. National trauma, an illustration would be 9/11. That was a turning point in our history. Historical traumas, issues of genocide, the Holocaust, what's happened to indigenous people and slavery, the idea of how those things affect people's lives today, even though they are historical. And there's room here in terms of an editorial to explore that area as well. So you might be thinking about that as one of the parts of working with an editorial, in which you will take a stand and present a position for that stand. I'm adding onto the blended space a discussion of the criteria in terms of text. I will be using those criteria to work with these, and I hope at this point in the class you can begin to share your work with others in the class and begin to read each other's work, because that's a very important part of what we're doing is collaboration. So good luck on Act 2, and I'm looking forward to reading your positions and your arguments. You have a great one.